a couple of thoughts with you. 22 years ago, I became the chairman of this committee, and I haven't since that time. That's because under the rules of the Republican side, if you chair a ranking member in another committee, you can't chair a subcommittee. And this is really the committee where really everything is happening. The problems that we're facing today are the ones that we deal with. So Tim and I are going to do a good job of that, and Joni and the rest of the committee. The committee meets for the first time in the new session of Congress to receive testimony from you guys, and you're used to this from after yesterday. And I don't think there's a member of this committee who hasn't read what happened yesterday. I know I have. We're joined by the same group. We have all the vices here, General Allen, Admiral Moran, General Walters, and General Wilson. So I appreciate your sticking to this one more time here. Last week, General Mattis used the guidance on the administration's plan to rebuild and strengthen our armed forces. But you know, I looked at some of the things that were said yesterday, some of the quotes, and I really do appreciate the fact that you folks came out and said things that weren't easy to say. We had General Allen talking about the Army. Only 3 of 58 brigade combat teams are ready to fight. We had General Wilson talked about how many of the hollow force actually used the term hollow force, and that's what we're faced with right now. A lot of the characteristics that we who are old enough to remember it, remember from the Carter administration, the Carter administration, know what we had to do the following years. And so that's very similar to what we're going to have to do now. We had General Walters. You talked about the operational tempo is as high as it was during the peak of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. We know the problems that are out there. And when I tell people, while I didn't always get along perfectly with Hagel when he was in the Senate, and I wasn't one of his strongest supporters when he came into this being the Secretary of Defense, when I read the statements that he has made from that position, it's a wake-up call to the American people who otherwise they don't know. They're not exposed to this. This is when he said, quote, "America dominance on the seas, in the skies, and in space can no longer be taken for granted." So this is something that is we want to address, we want to accept as a reality. And so we're going to have to improve our readiness, achieve balance in addressing shortfalls, and build a larger and more capable and more lethal joint force. Those were the statements that were made, the 3 priorities that were given to this committee, the major committee, just a week or so ago. So we have a lot of these problems that we're going to be dealing with. During Secretary Mattis's nomination hearing, he stated that we were going to have to increase operation and maintenance funding and while adapting to strengthening our military as the situation dictates. This means additional resources are needed. And what I'd like from our witnesses today is an outline of how you plan to restore the readiness to our armed forces and how we regrow our force, how do we maintain the equipment that has been through 2 decades of war, and how do we train that force to meet the national security requirements. So this is the committee where most of the action is going to be, and we've got a lot of work to do. And Tim and I have already talked about this, and we're going to see to it that we start getting a bigger attendance here, and that we start addressing these problems that we should be addressing before they hit the major committee. Senator Kane.